the session. And as you know, the recording will be made available on our website afterwards. So this morning we are super fortunate to have Carl Smit join us from Sandak-Lewin Trust. I've mentioned often enough that Sandak-Lewin Trust, and Carl particularly was the portfolio manager of my body corporates. Ashley Stradom, as part of his team, is now our portfolio manager, and we give them grey hairs. And you would think that having somebody that is in the sectional title space as a trustee would make it easy for the managing agent, but I think it's made it more difficult. And one of the topics that we are often dealing with in our own schemes, as well as in the schemes that we consult with, is what happens after the annual general meeting or the special general meeting or the trustee meeting. I know how we used to do it as managing agents. Laura's from my old team at Pam Golding Property Management Services, and I know that we try to get through those action items as fast as possible because time flies, and before you know it, you're getting ready for the next meeting again, and we don't want to rush around like headless chickens to deal with action items. So Carl's going to give us some tips of the trade of how to minute, how to put action items in place, what does qualify as an action item, what doesn't, reasonable turnaround times, and then of course from a practical perspective how things are done in their offices, and how he's seen it done, obviously from the multitude of schemes that he's worked with. Kyle, do you have any announcements that you'd like to make at this point?
Yeah, just a few. So good morning, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. And thank you very much for tuning in this morning. As Linda has mentioned, this webinar will be recorded and published on our YouTube channel. So please remember to like and subscribe to our channel. It all helps a lot. If you haven't already, then please do subscribe to our newsletter so you can keep in touch with our team. We also just had our first TVDM Talks table discussion on our neighborhood, which took place last Friday. This is a new segment where once a month you can join our consultants live and ask any questions that you may have for them. The next one will be on the
do mute yourself if there's some background noise on your side, if you don't mind. Thank you. Sorry for that interruption, Kyle.
Thanks, Eve. So the next one will be on September 8th at 10 a.m. and this feature is only available to paid for members. Then if you're looking for training, also make sure to check out Stratafin's trustee training in conjunction with TVDM consultants. I will post a link in the chat below. The TVDM consultants team will also be at the NAMA Winter Wonderland event on the 25th of August at the Durbanville Golf Course. So if you're in the area, then make sure to come and say hi. Matthew and Zelinda will also be flying to Durban on the 15th of September to participate in the NAMA Community Schemes Expo. If you'd like to sign up, then please contact Vanita and Kerry Lee. I'll add their email addresses as well as all other relevant links in the chat below. Yeah, thank you. That's all from my side.
Fantastic. And for those of you that have some more time this morning, please join Stratafin's webinar at 11 o'clock. They've got an interesting topic. I think it's called Taking the Attorneys Out of Legal Fees. I hope I've got it right. I'll be joining that one afterwards. So we'll be sure to end at 11 o'clock on the dot, or just before, to give everyone an opportunity to go and grab a cup of coffee or a bathroom break before joining that. Carl, without further ado, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending today. It's really great to see the turnout. A lot of names that I recognize, people that I've worked with, people that I have sparred with, and people that I've seen at various meetings throughout the years. Now, today's topic is a very, I think, a very challenging one for a lot of managing agents, in that we prepare ourselves for an AGM. We get ready, we've got all our voting slips and everything there for the meeting. We get to that meeting, it goes smoothly, it doesn't go smoothly. We get to the end of the meeting, we sigh of relief that we've come to the end, and then we kind of feel, well, you know what, done and dusted. Now what? But actually there's a lot that comes out of an AGM, a lot that happens at an AGM that we need to be aware of, that requires us an action of some sort. So the most important for me is that when we hold that AGM, we make sure that the decisions are taken and recorded. So we've so many times have walked away from AGMs and the budget hasn't been adopted. the worst one nowadays is trustees aren't elected, and we know where we can take that. That basically is, well, the other option is get an EMA involved and appoint an EMA if nobody wants to stand as a trustee. But now we look at, and the other one I really don't like is that people walk away from meetings and the votes have not been recorded. The decisions that have been needed have been taken, such as the adoption of the budget, the confirmation of the insurance cover, the 10-year maintenance plan. There's no record whether those have or haven't been adopted. And to leave a meeting without that confirmation, that's A, contrary to the legislation, and B, it means that you could end up with a totally failed AGM. So from my point of view, that is the first step. Have you confirmed the decisions taken at that meeting? If they're all confirmed, great. You now have decisions, and now come the actions that are the critical things that need to be taken. Firstly, a lot of us sit in the situation where we now have a new bunch of trustees, great, fantastic, 4, 5, 6, sometimes even more people that now want to stand as trustees. And the first thing that my managers need to do is get the details of those trustees. Yes, some of them are owners, some of them aren't owners. But we need details, because the first actionable item is to make sure we know who we're communicating with from the trustees' point of view. And second of all, we need that information to be able to submit their details to CSOS. The OMBIT requires that we notify them of who the trustees are. And so that is the first point for my managers. They must have that information when they leave, even if the trustees have or have not decided to have a meeting directly after the AGM, because they need to have a meeting very, very soon. Why? Because we have other requirements that need to be dealt with. So now we can work from the point of view that AGM, I would say 90% of the time, my managers go to a meeting and they're prepared. They have a resolution with them. Their intention is, and we're talking here, I know I'm talking from the point of view of an in-person meeting, but there is only a slight subtle difference in terms of an in-person versus a virtual meeting. We still must have the intention to have a trustees meeting directly after the AGM. Some of the trustees or some of the owners have asked, but why are the owners not notified? There isn't a requirement to notify them of the first trustee meeting, because it should be a very short to the point meeting. And the trustees at that meeting can set dates and communicate them to the members if they so wish, to say, these are dates that we've set. And these are when we're going to meet. And if you want to attend, or should I say, where we're going to meet. And these are the dates that you can, if you want to, attend a meeting. So that's, I think, your first actionable item. Call that trustee meeting. Why? Because we need to deal with a few items out of that meeting that are critical. First of all, the Management Rule 25.1 says we need to confirm the levies for the financial year. So many times we walk away and we forget about the requirement to actually confirm to members within 14 days that the levies for the financial year are going to be collected over 12 months or 4 months or even 1 month. And this is the amount that's actually to be collected. But what else is in that Management Rule 25 that should also be confirmed? And my managers have a standard resolution that they take to their meetings to say, right, levies, fantastic. Of course, we've forgotten about the really important one, which is the position that everybody fights for. Chairman of the body corporate. I mean, that's a big title in our community schemes management. Zelinda loves that title that she has, chairman of her body corporate. I secretly know that she wishes she wasn't, but I'm just going to leave it at that. But we must confirm who the chairperson is. The only time we can't is where that body corporate, we don't need to, is where the body corporate only has 2 members. Because those 2 members, they're not going to confirm a chairperson. And the legislation allows for that. So we don't have to confirm a chairperson there. But In the normal course of events, we need to confirm a chairperson. We need to deal with the levies. Make sure we have confirmed what the levies are for the financial year, and they must be in accordance with the approved budget. One of the bad habits of annual general meetings, and I must say that I have attended hundreds of AGMs in my career, and the one item that grinds me every time is where the members decide on the increase in the levies, and it's all about the percentage. Fine, the percentage is one thing, but we're actually confirming the amount of income that that body corporate is going to collect to cover its estimated expenditure. And that's the critical thing. If we're going to change the percentage increase, it changes the amount of income, or we change the date of increase, because we always focus on this date and the percentage. It becomes about how much income. And one of the items that I stress with my managers is the minute they change that percentage, changes the amount of income, and what is the impact on the bottom line? Does that mean they now have a loss for the year? Contrary to the legislation, you can't actually have a budget with a loss. So please make sure the owners are aware of the consequences of that action. So levies, confirmed. Chairperson, confirmed. But what else? In 25, they also refer to the fact that we need to notify the members of the interest that is going to be charged on arrears. And part of the resolution that my managers take to their meetings is to confirm what is the percentage that's charged on those arrear levies. Now that's, to me, I think, three of the critical areas for after an AGM. We also focus on the fact that there's this gray area about levy clearance certificates where managing agents can or cannot. And so we take care of that at the first meeting, which, like I say, 90% right after the AGM, setting dates for meetings. Some body corporates very much want to do that, some don't. Assigning portfolios, very important. You may have various skills within your scheme's board of trustees, and they decide who's going to be financial trustee, maintenance, communication, all of those kind of items. So those are more practical than legal aspects, but we do need to deal with setting the tone for the year. But what items have we forgotten? We've forgotten that there are more actionable items, barring the obvious one, directions and restrictions. There are a few others that we need to focus on. And they're not necessarily obvious, but I do believe that they are ones that the trustees of our body corporates should be focusing on. They should actually make sure that they are dealt with. And that is the following. One, we have an obligation to have fidelity fund cover in place after, for every body corporate, or the body corporate should I say. When we amend that budget, we affect the fidelity fund cover. The amount of fidelity fund cover is based on reserves at the end of the financial year and 25% of the operating budget for the year ahead. Now, if that in some way changes, we need to make sure that it's minuted at the annual general meeting, that must be updated and to an amount. And part of the trustee meeting should be to action it and say, right, it's going to be actioned. That is the amount authorized, dealt with, and the manager goes away from that meeting, or the portfolio manager, and has to action it to provide the trustees with comfort that it's been taken care of. Because if there is a claim and it's not properly covered, there are consequences. And the consequences on, as much as the responsibility rests with the trustees, or should I say the managing agent, the trustees are ultimately responsible to make sure it's happened. So we need to action that. And our guys, fortunately, we have within our organization strong links with various brokers, guys like Mike Addison from Adsure, Paul Tanner, all of those guys, to make sure that we get that actioned immediately. So within that 7-day period where the minutes of that annual general meeting need to have been circulated, those items are already actioned. Taxation, the signed financial statements straight off to the tax consultant. Get those actioned to get the tax up to date. So many of our body corporates are sitting with situations where they're now being penalized, and I'm not saying from our point of view, but because the trustees are reluctant to sign financial statements. You can't have a signed if you don't have a signed financial statement, it's not going to go to SARS. SARS query why the document's not signed, their consequences. It has to be signed. That it's submitted. It's not necessarily submitted, but confirmation is that that's a signed financial statement for SARS. And then what I mentioned earlier, your CS2, that submission now I believe now is online, confirming you've had your AGM, what the levies are, financial statements, all of that, and the trustees' information to be dealt with, and all that is on the managing agent's responsibility. Now, within our office, we're very fortunate. The systems that we have, that is an automated process within our organization. The fact that there's an AGM date that's been confirmed, our compliance department then takes care of that to actually say, off we go. It now needs to be submitted. I have the trustees' information because everything's recorded within our own management system. I know what the insurance information is. I know what the financial information is. So it's communicated to the various departments to say, you need to action it. I'm not going to go ahead and mention names, but maybe I should. Pumeza and Robin, who deal with a lot of our compliance things, will action that immediately. They've got all of that information at their disposal. And with the things going online nowadays, it's very easy to get action. The problem, however, is if the manager hasn't confirmed or hasn't got those documents signed, and that is a critical issue. So that's very critical items, compliance issues. But what could there possibly be that isn't a direction, isn't a restriction, and does very much get forgotten? One of the items that gets adopted at an AGM is your 10-year plan. The focus with the 10-year plan, whether it's amended or isn't amended, is to get those items that need to be dealt with at that meeting, or sorry, not at that meeting, but that plan that has been adopted at that meeting, to make sure that the wishes of the members are now complied with. We have to deal with painting, possibly in that year, have the quotes obtained. Maybe they're trivial things that, like fire compliance, that is part of this because it's an entire fire system that needs to be replaced or updated. There are various components of the 10-year plan, and it's part of the reporting back at the next AGM that the trustees give to the members to say, we have complied with the 10-year plan, these items have all been taken care of, or we didn't take care of them because we don't feel that's necessary, the condition has not deteriorated to such an extent that it can be taken care of, and it's going to be an amendment to the plan and we're deferring it to the next financial year. So those items are very, very key in terms of actioning out of that meeting. The trustees will be made aware of them by the manager. The manager will say, right, what are we actioning? How are we prioritizing? And they then directed to go get quotes on those items. Some of the companies nowadays offer services, and I know one of them, and our managers are seeing them tomorrow, Yanni from NABA, and they offer the service that they'll get the quotes for you. They'll present or they'll do monthly checks. Okay, it comes at a cost, but it takes the responsibility of the trustees, to some extent the managing agent, to keep the flow of that 10-year plan going. Doesn't necessarily mean that the work's going to be done, because ultimately still a trustee's decision as to when it's going to happen within that 10-year plan period. The last item from the AGM, directions and restrictions. Restrictions, well, I think the trustees must be aware of it, the consequences of it, and that should be explained by the manager to them. The directions, well, that's what the members want the trustees to deal with. once again, action. We have an internal task reminder system that will then, the manager will record that. That is something that they're going to look at. When is it action for? What is the action out of it? So that those items are then kept on the table until they resolve, so that when the trustees come back to the next meeting, their feedback is, you asked us to replace the intercom system, we got quotes, it was replaced, done and dusted. And that's the way our guys and ladies, should I say, work in terms of actioning items out of the AGM. But what else? I mean, do we only have annual general meetings where we need to action items? No, we have special general meetings, and special general meetings are nowadays, I'd say, barring to overturn a restriction or exceed a restriction, a lot of it has to do with amendments to rules. Now, we amend conduct rules, management rules, just so that the body corporate functions better. Things that are changed are applied to, that apply to this scheme, are enforced through these rules. But how many times do we walk away from a meeting and now what? Yes, the rules have to get to CSOS. What are the requirements? What do we need to actually do with that set of rules that have now been adopted by the members by special resolution? Well, do we just send it off to CSOS? No. First of all, there is a form. Second of all, it has to be signed off by the trustees, the resolution that must be included. All of that is part of the pack. And then we forget the one simple requirement that is in the legislation. It must be submitted to CSOS within 10 days. Now, I know a lot of us, we're going to turn around and say, well, CSOS isn't that efficient. They don't take 10 days, within 10 days, we don't get our responses. They take forever, blah, blah, all that kind of stuff. That doesn't mean to say that we should sit back and not comply with what the legislation says. We should. We must make sure that happens. So, yes, if those rules had been adopted as they'd been circulated, all of that information should be at your meeting with you. The rules to sign, the resolution to be signed, all of that. And that's what our managers go to the meeting with. They're prepared to deal with it. But I will say this, 9 times out of 10, we amend a rule. We don't agree to this. We change that. And then what? You can't sign them off at the meeting. So once again, part of our compliance ladies, they have to make sure that all of those I's are dotted, all the T's crossed to get that through to CSOS. And yes, if everything works within the 10 days, so that CSOS can then come back with their certificate to say, here you go, guys, these are enforceable. Because until we get that certificate, that rule that says you can fine an owner if you go through a process does not apply. And that is for responsibility on the manager and the managing agent to pass on to the trustees to say, guys, as much as you want to fine somebody, you can't. As much as that container that's been parked in that bay for the last 3 weeks and the owner has kept on saying he's moving the container, you can't go and fine him because you don't have that right. So it's very critical that preparation is done by the managing agent before the meetings so that they're ready for the consequences and the actions afterwards. Now, we can be as prepared as we like. Things go wrong, but it's what we do right after that meeting that is important. And that's where my best advice to any managing agent, the first thing that you're going to do the next morning when you walk in after that meeting is list your actionable items, get your minutes done, and then action them with the relevant parties within your organization, or if they fall to you, make sure you action them accordingly from there. The minute you've got that structure in place within yourself, that plan done, the actionable items will follow from there. And in saying all of that, there is one item that I've left off entirely. One item that we don't consider. What should we be doing with all the information that we get from an AGM? We should be making sure we have all the records available to us, because owners are by nature inquisitive, and they'll want to make sure the votes were correct. They'll want to make sure that the proxies are valid, and all of that should be stored, if not in hard copy, electronically, so that you comply with Management Rule 27 in terms of the records of your scheme. You need to have all of that. Financial records in terms of 26, various other records in terms of 27, so that if a member turns around and says, I want access to the voting of that AGM, they have rights to have it. They are fully entitled to see who voted for what item, who voted against, and the worst one, which we all have, is who voted for which trustee. All of that must be stored. In our case, it's electronic. It's within our data system, and it is to be provided on request to a member. Trustee meetings, very different. The format is usually set by the trustees. They want to deal with matters in a way. And to action out of those items, or action out of those meetings, once again, still the compliance aspect of minutes within 7 days. Once you've got the actionable items, and your setup of your minutes nowadays, actionable minutes, if your structure of your minutes is an actionable column on them with a person responsible, you're conveying to the trustees who's taking care of what. So many times we set up a set of minutes, and I know that there are various courses that are offered for that through Paddocks and various other companies, but minutes should record the decisions taken. You don't want to read through a 15-page document and 3 of those pages are to deal with one item and you still do not know what actually the decision was. So minutes must be precise. They must confirm what is the item under discussion, what is the decision of the members or the trustees, and then who's going to deal with it. Is it the managing agent? Is it a trustee? Is there a deadline? All of that should be recorded, because once again, it gives the manager and the trustees a full intention of how they're going forward. You can't have something up in the air. And I do believe it's the responsibility of the managing agent to drive that process. They must be the one that must be driving. Who's deciding, what is your decision? How is it going to be actioned? Who's actioning it? And what is the actual process going from here? Are we going to get quotes? Are we going to appoint this contractor? Are we going to engage with that attorney? Because from there, you give the managing agent a direct, you give them a direction in which they're going. They know. And our guys will come back to the office. They'll know them or their assistant is going to, right, you've got to get this quote in, that's got to get there, record on the internal system. This is what we're doing. This is how we're going. And so we go. Deadlines, always focusing on a deadline, because come to the next meeting, even if it's quarterly meetings and nothing's been actioned, the worst thing is, well, we didn't know who was going to do it. We must minute who is dealing with what. And that is, for me, the most critical item of a trustee meeting. Barring that aspect, what is the other role of a managing agent? To ensure that the decisions taken at that meeting are legally binding and that the trustees could take that decision. So some of the decisions that have come out of meetings where my managers have been challenged, and no disrespect to attorneys, but some of them who are not au fait with the property industry, or worse, the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act, push the agenda and say, this is what we can do. It's a difficult one because, attorneys and certain other people seem to think that they can be more vocal, and if the more vocal they are, the more they seem to be right, and so we go. As a managing agent, Your role is to ensure that the members are aware of what the legislation says, what the members can vote on, what the trustees can vote on. We recently come up against the issue of load shedding, the installation of inverters. The worst one, the installation of inverters on lifts or for lifts. And so many times trustees have turned around and said, well, can we use the maintenance reserve fund to do that? Well, it's all overruled by one section of the legislation, Management Rule 29. It's an improvement. Simple as that. We're improving the common property and we need to follow that process. The maintenance plan, read through Management Rule 22. It tells you what is to be in that maintenance plan. It's a maintenance, repair, and replacement plan. I don't see a maintenance, repair, replacement, and improvement plan. Otherwise, the legislation is being misread. Those improvements are dealt with under 29. Some people have a different opinion. But that aspect, from my point of view, is clear as daylight. It's an improvement. You have a process. Some people may even perceive it to be luxurious. But in this particular circumstance, I do believe it's necessary. And that's the way you go. Follow 29.2. It tells you exactly what to do, even up to how you're going to finance it. So I did promise Linda today that I would do less talking and give people the opportunity to raise questions, because every time she invites me on one of these, I talk, including the last time where we were supposed to be having a bit of a conversation throughout the meeting. And 55 minutes in, I actually asked her if she'd like to say something, and it was almost over. So cover things from a managing agent's point of view without looking at it from a trustee's view, or mostly not looking at it from a trustee's point of view. But are there any questions that, besides I don't know how many comments in the chat, which I'm not looking at, are there any questions that anybody would like to raise?
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Carl. I think listening to you for 55 minutes is way more valuable than listening to me for 5 minutes for most of our audience. So I'm really thankful for that. If you do want to go take a look at the chat, Carl, there's a very special guest that joined us today with 4 legs and fur. And I'm sure that they took the most out of the session. So we're very thankful to have that photograph that was sent to us. So we do have a couple of questions for you. I've noted a couple down on my side as well. I'm going to start at the bottom and move my way up. Sandra, thank you so much. Thank you for always attending. Sandra has asked, can trustees assist with the planning and minutes of meetings to alleviate some pressure on the managing agent? I wish.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and you know what? That's not a bad question, because we've got quite a few schemes. Now, they've taken it on themselves to say, we're going to meet more regularly than what we need to, or are obligated to, or feel, they've taken a decision. Let's leave it at that. They're going to meet monthly. And they've turned around and said, but we only need to see you quarterly, or your contract only allows for a quarterly meeting, or up the contract with us. And the only thing I can say about that is, yes, minute your meeting, because that's an obligation. You have to minute it. And then what next? Actionable item, not the items out of the meeting, get it to your managing agent, because that becomes record of the body corporate. And the minute you do that, it's on file, it's in the minute book, and that's the first item. And then obviously, once again, it's to trustees, the same advice. Clear what is to be decided, what has been decided, and who's dealing with it. Don't have to make it all fancy. It's literally words on a piece of paper confirming who was there, what the issue was, what's the decision, and who's actioning it. And that's fantastic. I think that a lot more trustees should do that. Should take on the responsibility to meet without the managing agent, because you can't always wait for a meeting in 3 months' time. And it also takes away from that. We're emailing each other, and now what have we actually decided? And when we do that, there should be a responsibility on the manager to actually confirm a decision by a resolution that must be signed. We've got to be very careful on those items.
Some of the questions that I've got noted here you've touched on, but in your experience and how you motivate your portfolio managers, do you have a set, amount of trustee meetings that you offer or that you are willing to attend? Do you try to motivate your portfolio managers for the trustees not to meet? Do you give a little bit of kickback when the trustees want to meet frequently? The reason for my question is that there seems to be, and trustees on the call more than welcome to correct me if I'm wrong, but I seem to get the impression that there's a requirement or an idea of a requirement that trustees meet at least on a monthly basis. In my scheme, Carl, you may or may not have heard that one of the trustees want to meet twice during the month, which is mind-blowing. Oh. And what we find, and we're guilty of it as well, in that instead of having an agenda, we actually work through the minutes. So you end up having the same meeting over and over and over again. So do you have any comments there?
Two. First of all, I do think from a managing agent's point of view, the first item I want to say is, and this is something that comes back from 1995 when I started, and the comment from my manager at that stage was, there's no worse thing than to have a meeting for the purpose of just having a meeting. There must be a purpose behind that. So we push for quarterly meetings. From a managing agent's point of view, quarterly, I believe, especially if you've got a scheme that's running well, everybody knows what they're aware of, they can communicate in between those meetings. And if there's an urgency, they can have a small meeting, confirm to the trustee or the owners, or even in the case of where there's a managing agent, to the managing agent what the decision is about an issue. But I believe quarterly is sufficient. I know that some schemes, it's a bigger scheme, they feel they need to meet monthly. That's their decision. We do negotiate some contracts that say we're meeting monthly with that, and we take into consideration our fee, but mostly it's quarterly. Set the meetings for the year. Everybody knows where they are. I've got homeowners associations. They set the meeting. They even confirm their AGM date. And it's something we also now doing as well. Set the AGM date. Set something to work towards. And I've come across that in some other management companies as well, where they plan their year. We're dealing with the budget now. We're dealing with the trustee meetings. We're dealing with the insurance. We're dealing with all kinds of things like that to make sure that A, that we as the managing agent know where we stand, and B, the trustees of the body corporate know what the objectives are. So yeah, difficult one. And the going through the minutes of the previous meeting, yeah, that can prolong the agony. I'm sorry to say it. Rather, the manager should be putting a suggested agenda to the trustees and go through those previous minutes. List the items as under matters arising from the previous minutes, and then no longer need to go through there. I have a chairperson who's a chairperson on 3 of the schemes that we manage, and that process, he loves that. That's the way he works. And he allows then if you have a situation where a trustee arrives at a meeting and I say, but we need to discuss, fine, let's add it to the agenda. Because now we're taking 20, 25 minutes to go through the minutes of the previous meeting. That means it's another 25 minutes of sitting there. And mostly it's on the agenda. And I think that's where your chairperson must actually bring the meeting under control and say, this item's on the agenda, we're dealing with it. Okay, no, we'll add it under general. All right, we'll add it under finance. And that's also a role for the managing agent. Managing agent must be bold enough to stand there and say, well, sit there, should I say, hold on, guys, it's on the agenda. Let's deal with it under that item. Because structure to meetings helps the managing agent minute the meeting. When we have a meeting and we go, oh, we're discussing the garden, and then somebody pops up, but you know, the electricity for the lighting at the entrance is linked to the irrigation, and now all of a sudden we're discussing the electricity, and the managing agent's sitting there and he's going like, now what are we actually going? It's like left, right, center. Stick to the topic. Managing agents should actually turn around and say, hold on, guys, how am I going to record this? And I know we do record them on our phones with apps and all this and all that, but structure for the meeting saves time. and everything is about time nowadays, and that's most important. Just on a different item, and I didn't touch a lot on the electronic meetings, and I mentioned right at the end about the recording, the keeping the information and having it available and all that. And I saw the item in the chat. Yes, Carl, fantastic. It gives that all to you. It's electronically recorded. You've got that all there and dust and dusted to record your voting and everything. So it's a very good, addition to the management of a meeting. So I think we must always keep track of how technology can assist us with that.
Definitely. Let's take one of the questions on the chat, and then we can open it up to people that want to ask questions live. Melissa has a question for your company specifically as to whether or not you share the POPI policies with the AGM notice pack for consideration or approval of the members.
We do. This is actually a requirement now with the new ordinance that came through. That must be included on the AGM agendas. It's not like you're voting to change that. It's a standard document. It covers the body corporate in terms of how information is dealt with, who's accessing it, all those kind of things in compliance with the various legislations. So yes, it is included. We've this year pushed that very much. I mean, you know, the obligation on POPI for a sectional title scheme, to me, I think the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act was a little bit way ahead of POPI in terms of dealing with information, and it's all there. It says exactly what you must, in Management Rule 26, Management Rule 27, go read through it. It tells you what you have to have and who can access it and how long they've got to wait, and everything is there. So no disrespect to any of the managing agents that are on this chat at the moment, but the one where we still have managing agents turning around and saying to members, you cannot have access to this information because of POPI, or the voting at a meeting because of POPI. Sorry, guys, we need to start getting this right. We're making our industry look like it's, we're keeping its secrets from owners and things. That information readily available, should be readily available. And there shouldn't be this whole dispute over, well, I need it, or we're scared because, well, if you're scared that the guy's going to use it for something, or the agent, because they're an estate agent, have them sign some form of indemnity. You're protecting the body corporate to say, you can only use that information for this purpose, sign here, and if they don't, and they go use it for selling the property of the neighbor or whatever else, you're indemnified, and they can be taken on by the information regulator. And the information regulators, it's going to become a big part of managing agents' lives in the years ahead, because they're going to have claims from people to say this information was given out, and somebody's going to say, how was that given out? Well, you know, it's all on a WhatsApp group for the entire body corporate.
Don't get
sorry,
started on WhatsApp groups.
Yes, we can have a whole discussion on that, Zelinda, about how our pet hate is WhatsApp groups, but they do exist. There are certain controls that can be put in place. So they're not totally terrible, but they're not actually, from my point of view, that great either, because access to information there is not well managed. And that's my personal viewpoint. I'm pretty sure people are going to tell me otherwise, but I don't like them. And that's I'm always open to debate on that. That's it.
I think if memory serves me correctly, Marion suggested that we write a nice article on that. So I think it is on Matthew or Nicole's to-do list, and perhaps we could get our techie as colleagues to assist us with that as well. So guys, let's take some live questions or comments from those of you that are still with us. Carl, we reached a nice record, 132 attendees, I think, and we've dropped down to 128 now. So I'm sure out of 128 of us, there's somebody that would like to pose a question or make a comment live. Feel free to unmute yourself, alternatively raise your hand. Chantal, thank you so much for joining us all the way from PE. Please, over to you.
Morning, Zelinda. Morning, Carl, and everybody that has joined. Very interesting to listen to you, and thanks for the advice that you have given and some guidance. It's much appreciated. I just have a question with regard to FIC and the risk management compliance, and would like to know, how do you deal with that? Yeah, Zelinda pulling a face there. And I would like to know how you guys deal with it in terms of ensuring compliance, following your governing body general meetings, your AGM's appointment of your trustees, and even with new members coming in. Okay, I'm going to mute myself again.
Just trying to think of, when you say new members coming into the scheme, or how are we talking here? I just want to understand the question a bit better.
Yeah, Zelinda, maybe you can expand on it a little bit, perhaps. But the risk management compliance is another evil that we have to face, unfortunately, in our property management sector, in that we've got to ensure compliance with the FIC. And there are now various tick sheets that we have to tick with to ensure that the risk of those governing the schemes or appointed as trustees are taken into account. And if there's this whole host of things that we now have to comply with. So, yeah.
So, Linda, you must.
I was asked, and I'm
Yeah.
more than happy to be, to be challenged on this because it's very new. So I was asked a couple of weeks ago, do managing agents have to have a FIC risk management and compliance program in place? And I was like, well, I know nothing about it, so my answer is no. And then I was like, no, hang on a second, it can't be as simple as that. So I chatted to a couple of attorneys and auditors, and Alistair from PKF Octagon kindly came back to me, and I'll share his details in the chat and what he said. And he said a body corporate is not classified as an accountable entity. In a nutshell, these entities are mandated to report all physical cash receipts of 24,999 Rand or greater within 48 hours of receipt. This is reported online and all supporting evidence attached. FIC then investigate the declaration for any evidence of money laundering or other illegal activity. Now, I've only physically seen it once, and that is when a client came in to pay a 25,000 Rand deposit, which we had to then report. But it doesn't happen very often, and I don't know if people pay, number one, levies in cash and levies upfront to that extent. But I'll share the information that he shared with me while you're commenting, Carl.
Yeah, no, sorry, I thought it was something to do with that, and it's something that we dealt with many years ago, and that is that we literally don't deal with cash at our offices at all, because of that exact same problem. Because you do get the individual that comes to pay his levies, and now he's paying 35,000 Rand, and it's cash. And our thing for us is, that's risk on us, not just in terms of what, from a financial services point of view, but just in terms of holding that amount of cash. And why is it not a case of, and I had this perfect example from a gentleman I was having a conversation with over, and I think it was buying a car at the time. And I said to him, what happens when you get guys coming in here and they want to pay a deposit on the car, and it's 70, 80, 90, 100,000? And he says, it's simple as this. I take them to the bank, and they put it into my bank account. And then they need to fill out a form with us to say they have paid this amount of money into our account. They've got to now take on the responsibility on themselves, and it's on them. I then need to disclose that I've received that amount of money and what it was for, how it was to be dealt with, so forth. So we don't have to worry about that. Or even though if somebody does put money into our bank accounts, it's easily flagged and dealt with through our accounts department, is that we really have removed cash from our environment in all ways. Everything is electronic. We need to have an audit trail. We need to track it. If cash comes through of that volume, the banks will contact us. Our bankers are very strict in terms of that. So and because we also run a trust account, and I think where you're running individual bank accounts, it becomes a bigger responsibility on the managing agent in comparison to with the trust account. We have our trust accountants who will then deal with that with the bank and that individual. But yeah, the risk exists, and we every year, and just taking it a little further, we've put so much compliance in place in terms of our internal management for fraud aspects. We are as serious, and I can see, I've just noticed that our CEO, David Reeby, is included in this forum as well. And one of the strongest things that we've done is to make sure that the person that's authorizing a payment has nothing to do with loading the invoice or approving the invoice or anything. So, you know, it's those kind of strict controls that you have to have in place as a managing agent when you're dealing with money that is not yours. And David is, I think, for the last 10 years, focused so much on ensuring that we are compliant on that particular point of view, have the necessary insurance in place from that point of view, and that we can't have somebody pointing fingers at one of our staff members to say, hey, you're filling the books or whatever. It is imperative that we don't, that we keep those controls in place for the benefit of our clients, not just us. I see there's a question from Serena and Michelle Blackbeard. Serena?
Hi. Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to say that I've been to all the FEEC webinars. They've had a lot of them online, and the managing agents, the body corporate is not an accountable institution. But in terms of this whole grey listing, there's been so much more compliance required that if you are doing rentals, or even if you're managing body corporates, you're managing funds, that means you possibly have access to property that may be used for terrorist financing or proliferation of whatever it is. So if you're on rentals, we are considered then to be an estate agent. Unfortunately, it falls under that whole process before. So that as long as you are considered an estate agent, and I think they do see managing agents as estate agents until we can get more clarity from FEEC directly, which is perhaps something that NAMA can look into, and I have asked about that. So we know that in terms of the internal risk management and compliance programs, I believe we do have to have that. I believe we do have to flag not just cash deposits, which are now 49,999. It used to be 24,999. But not just cash deposits, which we need to then go and report on that FEEC website. So therefore, we would have to be registered with them and would have to follow their reporting process.
Okay. Thank you for that, Serena. Michelle?
I think Michelle's asking to raise, Carl.
That's you.
Yeah, I think she is. I also want to know why she's not at a meeting. But anyhow.
My question, actually, because I know what Carl has to say, so I'm going to direct it more towards TVDM. Going back to AGMs and specifically updating of conduct rules at an AGM. So your process afterwards, which is to get it through to the CSOS, they require signed AGM minutes. And it's kind of confusing for myself and my clients because we say that your AGM minutes get signed off the following year at that meeting. So you have your AGM, you agree on your conduct rules, you have a signed resolution, but now CSOS is also requiring signed AGM minutes. It's like, are we meant to get the AGM minutes signed off immediately afterwards?
Sorry, Carl.
No, Nicola, I'm coming in. It's actually something that we've had the debate with internally, and then I don't know if it's changed back again, because at one stage they wanted signed AGM minutes, and then they said they don't want signed AGM minutes. So it keeps on changing on their side. And practically what we just did was say, look, the trustees are in any case going to look at the minutes before they go out, and then effectively they're saying they're a true reflection. Now, and then that would that would allow them to sign the minute to be able to send through. But I was under the impression that it stopped. But I don't know, Nicole, maybe you've got a better advice on that one.
So I see Melissa Yates also said in the chat, from my understanding, it's fine to just submit draft minutes. They don't need to be approved by the members. It just needs to have like the chairperson's signature on it. That's how I've experienced, and I've never had any issues with them when I have submitted the draft minutes, but I always specify when I make the submission that these are the draft minutes, obviously, because they're only going to be approved next year by the members. and they seem to be happy with that. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's the way we're doing it in any case. But yeah, one of these days, CSOS maybe have to clarify that aspect.
All right, ladies and gents, we've got a minute left before 11, so please feel free to hop off if you'd like to join the Stratavan webinar if you've got any other meetings. Carl, if you've got time for 1 or 2 live questions, perhaps we can ask anybody if they do have any live questions or comments. I know while people are waiting, Laura had the question about the WhatsApp groups, and we really are going to delve into this a little bit deeper at a later point. But as you know, a managing director of your company, when a portfolio manager is asked to join a WhatsApp group, is that something that you require, or do you tell the managing agent that that's up to them and support them in that decision?
I think there are quite a few of my managers that are on this, and they know exactly where I stand with it. It's their decision. And I've had the situation where managers have joined groups, and then I've had to advise clients that they're being removed from groups. Because, to be honest, I know we have WhatsApp Business, and you can set hours, and you can add administrators that can control these particular groups and so forth. But I do think it oversteps a personal boundary, and that personal boundary is that we forget that the manager works from the morning to the evening, and then after that, possibly a meeting, and then their time. And I think from 7 o'clock in the evening, it's their time. If they're at after hours at a meeting still, they're going to charge for that. But now to expect the manager at 9 o'clock at night to be answering a question about somebody who's parked in a parking bay and nobody knows whose car it is, it's absolutely ridiculous. And I'm never going to support that particular aspect. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so anti these groups. But it's my manager's choice. If they say no, I'm behind them 100%. They say yes, I say to them, you are going to be putting yourself in this situation. I understand why you feel it's in the benefit of the client. Fine. But if it becomes something that is out of control, you need to speak to me and we'll take a decision from there. It's important that we understand that managing agents do not work a 9-to-5 job. So many times, at least 3 times a week, guys are sitting in meetings and they need to action the items out of that. And now they're being expected to be the supervisor. And this is one of the, I think if you ever have a session, it should be about what's the managing agent's role and what's your on-site supervisor's role? Because that to me is it's like the estate manager versus the portfolio manager. Where does the one start and where does the other end? Because so many times we've got body corporates that feel that the managing agent needs to fulfill that role as well, but we're not prepared to pay him for that. And that I think that's just unacceptable. So I think that's enough about WhatsApp groups from my side. Otherwise, we'll be here discussing it until next week.
Well, like I said, we'll definitely have a session on it, and we'll have a session on, and I think especially from an HAA role, the managing agent and the estate manager, I think that's really, really good. And then deal with the WhatsApps, maybe with an article or something like that. Ladies and gents, if there aren't any other comments or questions, we'll call it a day. Thank you so much for joining us. I have shared all of the information in the chat function. If you have any questions specifically aimed at Carl, his email address is there. Alternatively, you can pop it to us and we can share it with him. A copy of the recording will be made available on our website within a couple of days, as I say. And if you have any questions in regards to any of the issues that were discussed today or any of the services that we're able to offer or our colleagues are able to offer, please do give us a shout. We shared some of their contact details as well. Carl, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for the time of everybody that joined. We had a nice full house today, both on screen and off screen, so we really appreciate that. All right, everybody, have a fantastic day. Keep well. Bye-bye.
You too. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.